Hey guys, on today's episode, we preview the Gather Round. We take a look at some early contenders for the All-Australian team and why the MRO and tribunal is leaving everybody frustrated. All that and more on today's episode of Zero Hanger TV. All right, so straight into it. So the Saints 4-0. They're coming up against Collingwood in Gather Round. Going to be a pretty big contest.
Yeah, the game of the weekend, I think, and it will conclude the round on a 4 o'clock or 4:20 game or something on Sunday. It's going to be a fantastic contest. Hopefully the ground holds up well. We're not expecting the best weather over in Adelaide, and I think it's the 6th game at Adelaide Oval, but the contest itself is going to be great. Collingwood playing the best brand of football this year. St Kilda, the only 4-0 side, so this is really going to test them and their unbeaten start, and we're going to see what Ross Lyons-men are really capable of. I think they've knocked over some pretty decent clubs in the Dogs and the Dockers so far, but this Pies challenge is going to be quite interesting on a neutral deck as well.
Yeah, and so taking a look at the ladder, we've got the top 5, a really Victorian-looking top 5 at the moment.
Yeah, well, on top of the Saints and the Pies that we mentioned, you've got the D's up there, the Bombers and the Blues. Now, just outside of them, I think it's 7th spot, we've got Adelaide as well. Sydney just outside too, but that Adelaide-Carlton game on Thursday night, so open gather round is going to be another big one. I think two really entertaining sides, just the way they've played so far this season. And hopefully we might see the Crows push up. I certainly would if they beat the Blues. But yeah, very Victorian heavy top 5 at the moment, off the back of some, I guess, surprising form from the likes of St Kilda and Essendon.
Yeah, and so Geelong got their first win as well over Hawks on Easter Monday.
Yeah, it took them until the third quarter to really, of their 4th game, to really see how good this Geelong side will be this year. Obviously reigning premiers, and it's been a really slow start. And to do it over Hawthorn still leaves a lot of questions about, can they do it against some of the top contending clubs? Now they've got West Coast this week, and that's, I think most are going to be backing them in to make it 2 wins in a row with West Coast and obviously the injuries they've got at the moment. But a win this weekend for Geelong will also see them shoot up the ladder quite quickly after being 18th. I think we've got the Bulldogs play Port, so 2 clubs are sitting just above them. Same with the Tigers and Swans, and same with the Roos and the Lions. So assuming all of those are wins and we don't have any draws across those 3 games, and then Geelong do get a win over the Eagles, then they'll be up very close to the 8 or even in the 8 quite quickly as a result of those 3 games.
Yeah, so the ladder sort of taking shape. It's still very early days, but yeah, hopefully Geelong can shoot up there. A little bit of momentum going. So now we're going to take a look at some early contenders for the All-Australian team. Again, very early in the season to be doing this, but there's some clear standouts. So we'll start with the defence. So we've got Dacos in there.
Yeah, well, he's an interesting one. You could probably put him anywhere at the moment. We had Mark Blitzovs on the bench last year in the All-Australian side as a, I guess, utility option. But Nick Dacos, if you're putting him anywhere, and looks like at this point we're certainly putting him somewhere, it's going to be across that half back. But that half back line or small defenders positions are going to be really interesting this year. I think you look at someone like Jack Sinclair, who's been absolutely fantastic for the Saints in their strong start. He could make it successive All-Australian spots. And then Harry Sheezel, another one. There was a lot of talk about Dacos last year on whether he could be one that wins an All-Australian spot in his first year. And Harry Sheezel's certainly matching that, so he's a great chance. So those 3 names, the small defenders. The talls are probably not as certain, but Cal Wilkie in that medium-sized role that I think Tom Stewart's had for the past few seasons in the All-Australian side. Cal Wilkie's certainly the one that's leading that option in the back line.
And probably a bit of unbiased showing, but it looks like Stephen May's going to be shooting up there towards the end of the year. But so moving over into the midfield, we've got Bontempelli.
Yeah, the Bont looks to be back to his best. Yeah. Arguably the best midfielder in the competition when he's playing at his best. But he certainly gets that matched up by Clayton Oliver as well, who's been an absolute workhorse to start Melbourne's season this year. I think another one you look at is players like LDU, player like Mason Wood, if you're looking at bench spots, or even, I think a wing spot if we are trying to, reward wingers. And Mason Wood's held a role out wide for St Kilda absolutely fantastically over the first 4 weeks. And then a ruckman, I think Tim English would have to be the standout. There's been a lot of really strong contenders, but just from what English has been able to do for the Dogs across the opening 4 rounds, he probably is the one out in front in the rucks.
Yeah. And forward line, you really can't go past Jeremy Cameron. He's definitely got to be in there.
Yeah, I think there's 2 really obvious candidates to start your forward line off with, and 2 guys who were in the team last year, Jeremy Cameron, Charlie Curnow. Those 2 are likely going head-to-head again for the Coleman medal this year. So from a key position spine point of view, you're certainly going to be looking at those two. We'll cop a midfielder in there at some point. We'll just remains to be seen who. But if we want to look at the small forwards, Isaac Rankin's really putting his hand up early for a first All-Australian Blazer.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about Rankin and Rochelle being like a really nice forward line up there for the Crows, and they've certainly surprised a couple of teams. So now we're going to take a look at the rookie rankings. So a little bit of movement. We've got Filippo's gone up one spot.
Yeah, so a little bit of a rise. So I think our top fours all stayed the same. So Harry Sheasel at 1, Will Ashcroft at 2, Ruben Jinby at 3, Oliver Hollands at 4. Really good weeks from, I think, 3 of those guys. Ruben Jinby probably had a tougher one, but I think the runs he has on the board from his first 3 weeks certainly keeps him in that podium spot. Sheasel, once again, fantastic. If anything, stretched his lead over Ashcroft. But in saying that, Will Ashcroft had the most touches for Brisbane in their win over Collingwood in that Thursday night game. Oliver Hollands, once again, I think he most distance covered for Carlton 4 weeks in a row from 4 games. He's been absolutely fantastic in that wing role for the Blues. As you mentioned, Mateus Filippo shoots up from 6th into 5th spot. And then that sees Cam Mackenzie actually fall out altogether from our top 6. Max Michaelani at the Crows has just built every week, has been a big improver and was absolutely fantastic against Fremantle in that win at Adelaide Oval. So he comes into 6th spot. Mackenzie out, but he's right outside that top 6. You can also look at your Jacob Van Ruins, Judd McVee's, Lockie Cowans. They're all right outside there. And I think after round 6, we'll extend that top 6 to a top 7. So that'll jump up as the season goes on. How big our pool of draftees are as we get to look at more of players that haven't made their debuts this season. So yeah, plenty of movement still to come.
Yeah, exciting stuff. It seems like it's going to be pretty hard to knock Sheasel and Ashcroft off those top 2 spots though. All right, so another week and another week of MRO and tribunal frustration for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, this was a really interesting one. Tuesday night we had Tom Lynch cleared, Harry Mackay cleared. Now I think they were both 2 incidents that probably deserved at least a week. And then I think the Mackay one, you can certainly argue, well, what about the Ballard case? But I think that's the exact same. I think Charlie Ballard also deserved a week. So I think it's been quite frustrating for a lot of people to see what the MRO is grading as suspensions. And I think a lot of them we can probably agree with. And then obviously it only takes a couple of days and we've got a tribunal case hearing. And then it's back to square one and they're off. We did have Blake Acres, Griffin Logue's charges upheld last week. But at the moment, there's just a lot of inconsistency with what the MRO wants to see suspended and then what the tribunal says is suspended. So not only for fans, for the AFL, but there is just a lot of, like I said, it's just inconsistent. I think we just want to see something a bit more streamlined. That's why I think, reduced it to an MRO rather than a panel. And yeah, I think fans are kind of hoping we can just have it a bit more straightforward than what it is already.
Yeah, it really is just that inconsistency, like you said, leaving a lot of people frustrated. So more on that later. So MVP, going over to the MVP now, and a little bit of movement and new top spot.
Yeah, another new leader after 4 rounds now. Clayton Oliver comes in, huge game against West Coast. Both him and Christian Petrarca shared plenty of the votes atop that one with Brodie Grundy as well. But yeah, he comes in 47 votes. That sees him go 3 ahead of Nick Dacos, who moves into 2nd spot. I think he was just behind Mason Wood last week, and Mason Wood didn't poll this week, albeit in a Saints win, so he stays at 42 votes. Jeremy Cameron, 1 behind him. He had a perfect 20-vote game, so he's at 41. And I think we've got about 4 or 5 players on 40 votes, that being Charlie Curnow, Isaac Rankin, Marcus Bonson-Pally, and I think Luke Davies-Uniacke, who had a perfect 40 votes in the first 2 rounds and hasn't polled in the last 2 weeks. So really tight and contested. Do have about 10 players just separated by 7 votes after 4 rounds.
Yeah, so pretty interesting stuff. I think it was almost going to be a new leader every week, I think.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, that wraps it up for today's episode of Zero Hanger TV. Thanks, Mitch. Don't forget you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and catch up on all that latest AFL news on zerohanger.com.au.